All right, listeners, today we are going to deep dive into a topic that is, well, a little bit uh, unnerving apocalypse-ready vehicles. So you guys have been sending in some sources about prepping for, well, just in case civilization takes a detour. And the main question seems to be what kind of vehicle will get you through.
Yeah, you've given us a lot to work with articles from survivalists, a lot from gearheads who've clearly given this some thought, even companies that build those, armored cars that you see in movies.
Exactly. And I love this kind of deep dive, especially when it involves awesome vehicles. Yeah. This isn't just about picking the coolest car on the lot, though. We're talking about survival here. So our mission today is to go through these sources and find out what vehicles are best for handling everything from zombies and EMPs to, well, let's just say unpredictable terrain.
Right, and one thing that jumps out is the variety of vehicles. We've got everything from tricked-out trucks to motorcycles built for agility to, get this, a Toyota Sienna minivan.
Wow, really, a minivan? You'd think it would be all about those Mad Max-style vehicles.
Right, but there's a surprising emphasis on practicality. And that makes sense when you think about the no one-size-fits-all approach from a lot of these articles. The perfect apocalypse vehicle for a hurricane in Florida is going to be very different from the one you'd need in a city or escaping to the mountains.
That's true. Okay, so let's say you have a family and you're looking to bug out in style. One source here features this all-terrain RV. It's called the Unicat Terracross TC78 Family Suite. Like a luxury apartment on wheels, complete with a kitchen and a bathroom and multiple beds.
Yeah, it's a great example of the mobile fortress concept, clearly aimed at folks who prioritize comfort and self-sufficiency even when things go really bad. But as one expert pointed out, that level of luxury comes with a pretty big price tag. Over €1 million.
Yeah, for €1 million, you better be surviving in style.
And that kind of wealth, it might make you a target in a world where resources are scarce.
That's a good point. There's a trade-off, it seems like, between being well-equipped and, flying under the radar. What about those who want to blend in?
Right. Well, for them, something like the armored BMW X5 Protection VR6 might be a better choice. It's discreet, looks almost exactly like a regular X5, but it's built to withstand attacks. So you get the protection without attracting unwanted attention.
Because I can imagine rolling up to a survivor camp in a Darts Prom Braun Black Stallion, that luxury SUV that's all decked out, might not be the best approach. You're basically announcing, hey, come rob me.
Exactly. It's like what one source said, appearing to have lots of resources might make you a target.
Okay, so you got to consider how your vehicle handles threats like EMPs, those electromagnetic pulses that can fry electronics.
Right, and this is where those older, less tech-heavy cars might have an advantage. One source mentioned the Chevrolet Spark LS, a very basic car with minimal electronics, as being a potential EMP survivor.
So in a world where technology fails, your grandpa's old clunker might be the ultimate survival machine.
It's all about understanding how EMPs work. They basically overload electronic systems, so the fewer electronics your car has, the better its chances. One thing to look for is a manual injection pump, which controls fuel flow mechanically instead of electronically.
Okay, so what is a manual injection pump? I don't know a lot about cars.
Well, think about it this way. Imagine you have two toys. One's a wind-up toy, the other is a fancy one that needs batteries. When the power goes out, that wind-up toy will keep going. The manual injection pump is kind of like that wind-up toy. It keeps the engine running even when the electronics are fried.
Okay, so it's mechanical. So do we all need to trade in our cars for vintage diesel trucks?
Well, not necessarily. It's about weighing the pros and cons. I mean, modern vehicles offer comfort and fuel efficiency and safety features that might be good in some situations. Older vehicles may be more EMP resistant, but they might not be as reliable or comfortable.
Okay, so once again, it's about what's best for your individual needs. But you also need to consider the terrain you'll be dealing with. Will it be flooded roads, snow drifts, Rocky Mountain passes?
Right, and that brings us to the must-have features that a lot of these sources mention. Four-wheel drive, diesel engines, plenty of ground clearance. In other words, being able to go off-road.
Right, because in a world gone wrong, those paved roads might be useless. You might need to ford rivers or escape to some remote wilderness.
Exactly. And one article recommended seeking out isolated locations, far away from population centers, and for that you'd need a vehicle that can handle tough terrain.
Right.
They give this great example of a vehicle that is perfect for that, the Sherp ATV. It can climb over obstacles that are like 3 feet tall and operates in extreme temperatures, making it perfect for getting to those hard-to-reach places.
It sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie.
Yeah.
But it makes sense. Sometimes the most rugged vehicles are the most valuable.
Absolutely. But even the most capable vehicle is only as good as the person driving it. You need to know how to drive it, how to maintain it, how to repair it.
I mean, what good is a tank if you don't know how to change a tire?
Exactly. So choosing the right vehicle is only the first step. You also need the skills and knowledge to operate and maintain it.
And let's not forget about storage space. You got to carry supplies, fuel, maybe some treasures you salvaged from the old world.
Yeah, absolutely. One article I found called The Ultimate Bug-Out Vehicle Setup has a whole section about packing your vehicle the right way. They talk about distributing the weight evenly, securing everything, storing dangerous things like extra fuel outside the vehicle.
Yeah, you don't want a stray spark igniting a fuel canister inside your car.
Right. And that same article stresses the importance of having a plan for everything. What if your vehicle breaks down? What if you get separated from your group?
So it's not just about having a cool ride. It's about thinking things through. Okay, so all these features are great, but how much do you want your vehicle to stand out? It brings us back to that armored versus discreet debate. On the one hand, you have those vehicles like the Dart's Prawn Brawn and the Knight XV, basically tanks.
Yeah.
But then you have those that blend in, like that armored Mercedes S-Class.
Right. It's almost psychological. What approach makes more sense?
I mean, sometimes attracting attention makes you a target. But in other cases, it might scare off threats. There's no easy answer.
And that's where these sources get really interesting. They talk about the pros and cons of each. They quote survival experts and security specialists who really thought about this. Ultimately, it comes down to you, your personality, your risk tolerance, and the threats you're most likely to face.
So as we wrap up this first part of our deep dive, what is the main thing our listeners should be thinking about?
I think the biggest thing to remember is that choosing an apocalypse-ready vehicle is a very personal decision. There is no one right answer. It's about doing your research, knowing what's important to you, and choosing the vehicle that fits your vision of survival.
And remember, even with the best vehicle, you are only as prepared as your skills and knowledge and ability to adapt. And that is what we're going to be looking at next.
You know, when you look at all these articles about surviving the apocalypse, it seems like there's a lot of focus on the hardware, like the tricked out vehicles, the survival gear. It's all very, Mad Max.
Yeah, it's exciting. Who doesn't love a good post-apocalyptic vehicle?
But what they don't always talk about is the software, the human element. You can have the best 4x4 in the world, but if you don't know how to change a tire or read a map or even treat a wound, that vehicle won't help much.
It's like one expert said, your bug-out vehicle is just a metal shell. It's what you know that will determine if you make it.
Right, and it makes you think about all those stories where people are, trying to survive. It's a good reminder that to survive long-term, you need a different set of skills than we use every day.
So let's talk about those skills. What does our listener need to become a true apocalypse survivor?
Well, one that comes up a lot is navigation. We're so used to GPS now, but if the grid goes down, that's useless. Knowing how to read a map, use a compass, or even navigate by the stars could be the difference between finding safety and getting lost.
It's like in that movie where they had that old map. It was like their lifeline.
Exactly. And then there's first aid. In a survival situation, you're going to get hurt. One article recommended taking a wilderness first aid course because it teaches you how to deal with injuries when you can't just go to a hospital.
That's a good idea. It's one thing to have a first aid kit, but you gotta know how to use it.
Right. Imagine having a serious injury, and all you have are the things in your kit and your own knowledge.
That's scary. Okay, so navigation, first aid, what else?
Well, self-defense is a big one, and this is where things get tricky. Some people say you need guns, others say you should focus on things like hand-to-hand combat or using whatever you can find as a weapon.
It's hard, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you want to protect yourself and your family, but using violence can make things worse.
Exactly. And you have to think about how comfortable you are with using force, maybe even lethal force. You don't want to have to figure that out when it's already happening.
Right. It's all about being prepared and knowing what you're willing to do. But self-defense isn't just about fighting. It's about avoiding danger in the first place.
Right. One expert said it's like being a deer in the woods, always looking around for threats. You got to be proactive.
So don't be Rambo, be smart, and try to avoid violence.
And on top of all that, there's the mental side of things. One article said it was the most overlooked aspect of survival. They said mental toughness, being resilient, staying calm, is as important as any physical skill.
Yeah, the apocalypse is going to be stressful. You're dealing with so much unknown, being away from your loved ones. It's got to be tough.
It is. Like one expert said, your mind can be your greatest asset or your worst enemy.
So how do you get mentally tough?
Well, some people are just naturally tougher, but the good news is you can train your mind. It's like a muscle. One article said to try things like meditation or deep breathing to manage stress.
So you have to be prepared not just physically, but mentally and emotionally.
Exactly. And one more thing that's often overlooked is community. In a world without laws, having people you can trust and rely on is really important.
There's strength in numbers.
Right, right. It's not just about protection. It's about having support, sharing resources, and just having people to help you deal with everything. One article even said that community is how we keep our humanity in the face of chaos.
Yeah, it's like in those stories where the loner never does well.
Those communities are built on trust and shared values and working together. And that's something we can do now, build those relationships with our families and friends and neighbors.
So it's not just about surviving, it's about building a better society.
Right. So we've talked about skills, mental toughness, community.
Okay, but what should our listener actually pack in their bug-out bag?
Yeah.
What are those must-haves to get through the first few days?
That's a great question, and one these articles spend a lot of time on. They all say that your bug-out bag is your lifeline in those first few days when you might not have access to anything.
Okay, so let's go through that bag. What are the essentials?
Water is number one. Most say to pack at least a gallon per person per day. And you should have water purification tablets or a filter too, so you can make any water you find safe to drink.
You can't live long without water.
Exactly. Now for food, focus on things that won't go bad and that have lots of calories and nutrients. Canned goods, dried fruit, nuts, those kinds of things. Even hard candy for a quick energy boost.
It's like packing for a camping trip, but with a lot more at stake.
That's a good way to think about it. But unlike camping, you can't just go back to your car if you forget something, so you got to plan carefully.
Okay, so water, food, we got our navigation and first aid stuff. What about shelter?
A good tent, a tarp, a sleeping bag, those are musts. Maybe a space blanket for extra warmth, and a hammock so you can sleep off the ground. Some even said to pack a bivy sack. It's like a waterproof cover for your sleeping bag.
Wow, there's so much to think about.
There is. And that brings us to tools.
The tools of the apocalypse, what do we need?
A multi-tool is good, something with pliers and a saw and a screwdriver. A fixed blade knife is important for cutting rope, preparing food, and, if you absolutely have to, for self-defense.
Right, in a bad situation, anything can be a weapon.
And for bigger jobs, like building a shelter, a hatchet, or a small axe is good to have.
We're building our apocalypse toolbox.
We are. And don't forget light. A headlamp and a flashlight are key, especially for when it's dark. Extra batteries are good too, or even one of those hand crank flashlights that don't need batteries at all.
Oh yeah, those are clever.
Right. And speaking of essentials, your first aid kit, make sure it's got bandages, antiseptic wipes, pain relievers, gauze, antibiotic cream, and any medications you need.
So we got to think about those everyday problems too.
Exactly. And one more thing people forget is hygiene. Pack soap, hand sanitizer, toilet paper, and feminine hygiene products if you need them. They seem like little things, but they make a difference.
It's easy to forget about them until you need them.
It is. And last but not least, personal documents. Keep copies of your ID, passport, birth certificates, insurance, anything important in a waterproof container.
You might need them to prove who you are.
Right. Now, all this is just a starting point. You need to adjust it for your own needs and the environment you'll be in.
So what should our listener take away from this?
That your bug-out bag is more than just a bag of stuff. It's a sign that you're prepared, you're resourceful, and you're serious about surviving. It's about taking care of yourself, even when you don't know what's coming.
That's a great way to put it. As we finish up this part of our deep dive, I'm kind of amazed by how much goes into prepping for this. It's not about being scared, it's about being prepared for anything.
Exactly. We don't know what the future holds, but we can choose to be ready.
So we've talked about vehicles, skills, bug-out bags. But what happens after the initial craziness? What about rebuilding, starting a new society?
That's a good question. And not a lot of these sources talk about that. It's easy to focus on just surviving, finding food and water and shelter. But the hard part is how to build a future.
Yeah, you can't live off canned goods forever.
Right. That's where those long-term skills come in. Things like farming, building, making things, all those things that seem kind of old-fashioned now.
It's like we need to go back to what our ancestors knew.
Yeah, one source called it pre-skilling, learning those old ways of doing things. They said those skills will be really important for building new communities and being more self-sufficient.
So it's not just surviving, it's thriving. It's about making things, not just using them up.
And that's where community is even more important. You need people who can work together and share what they know.
It's like the apocalypse could be a chance to rethink our values, to move away from being so focused on ourselves and having more stuff.
Yeah, one source said that the apocalypse could be a chance to hit the reset button, to build a society that's better, more fair, and works with nature.
That's pretty optimistic.
Yeah.
But I get it. It's like we get to ask ourselves what's really important and what kind of world we want.
And it makes us rethink technology. Maybe not get rid of it completely, but use it better.
Like choosing the right vehicle. Right.
Exactly, the right tools for the job.
So as we wrap up, I'm feeling, well, hopeful, I guess. It's scary to think about, but also exciting to think that we could make something better out of it.
I agree. It's about taking on the challenge, learning from what's happened, and using our knowledge to build a future we want.
And even if the apocalypse never happens, a lot of these skills, being self-reliant and resilient, those are good things for anyone.
Absolutely. It's about being ready for anything.
Well, that's a good place to leave it. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the apocalypse.
It was fun.
And remember, everyone, knowledge is power. Be prepared. And even if things get tough, we can still make it. Stay curious, stay prepared, and until next time, happy prepping.